the money hits your account, and for a moment, it feels like you're finally making progress. Then you look again, and it's as if something quietly pulled you back. You've just been paid, and as you open your payslip, whether on your phone or on paper, there's that brief sense of relief. Another month behind you, another stretch of effort that actually led somewhere. But your eyes don't stay at the top for long. The gross pay looks decent, reassuring even, until your attention begins to drift downward. Deductions appear. Then tax. Then more deductions. Line by line, the number starts to shrink until what finally reaches you feels smaller than what you believed you earned. And you don't question it, because you've always been told this is normal. Everyone goes through it. That's just how earning works. But something doesn't quite sit right. You start hearing about someone else, maybe a business owner, maybe someone investing on the side, earning significantly more than you, bigger opportunities, more income, a lifestyle that looks completely different. Yet when taxes come up, they don't seem weighed down by it the same way you are. Sometimes they even mention paying less, not in total, but in proportion. And that's when the quiet question begins to form. How is it that someone making more somehow keeps more? From where you're standing, it feels like the harder you push forward, the more gets taken away. You're doing everything you were told to do. You're consistent. You're working. You're earning honestly. So why does it feel like the system responds differently to someone else? Most people ignore that thought and move on. But if you allow yourself to sit with it just a little longer, you start to notice something deeper. Maybe it was never just about how much you earn. Maybe it has everything to do with how that income is structured. The invisible system. What most people never stop to consider is that taxes don't just happen randomly. They follow a structure, one that quietly shapes how money moves long before it reaches you. Once you begin to notice this, the frustration starts to soften, because you realize it's not simply about working harder or earning more. It's about understanding the rules that were already in place. The system itself isn't designed to punish effort, but it does reward certain behaviors more than others. When you earn income in a traditional way through a salary or wages, it flows through a path that is straightforward and predictable. It gets recorded, taxed, and reduced before you even have full control over it. On the other hand, when income is created through assets, businesses, or investments, it often follows a different route. That route allows for more flexibility, more timing decisions, and in some cases, more efficiency. This is where the difference begins to appear. It's not that one group is avoiding taxes altogether. In fact, they are still operating within the same legal system. The distinction is that they understand how money is categorized, how it moves, and when it is recognized. Those small differences can change how much is ultimately kept. When you look at it this way, the picture becomes clearer. Employees are typically taxed on what they earn as it comes in, while asset owners are often taxed based on how and when value is realized. That shift alone creates a completely different experience, even if the total income appears higher on paper. And once you see that, something changes. The frustration starts turning into curiosity, because now the question is no longer, why is this happening to me? It becomes, what is it that I haven't been shown about how this actually works? Why most people never learn this? What makes this even more interesting is not just how the system works, but why so few people ever learn it in the first place. Think about it. From the time you're in school, you're taught how to earn. You're told to study, get qualified, find a stable job, and build a steady income. But no one really explains what happens after you earn that money. No one breaks down how it's treated, how it flows, or how it can be structured differently. The conversation almost always stops at make more, as if that's the only variable that matters. So most people grow up believing that income is the goal, not realizing that what you keep matters just as much, if not more. Even when people start looking for financial advice later in life, the focus is often the same. Increase your salary. Start a side hustle. Work harder. While those things can help, they rarely touch on the deeper layer of how money is managed within the system itself. It's like being taught how to fill a bucket without ever noticing the holes at the bottom. There's also another factor that quietly keeps people away from this knowledge: fear. The moment taxes come up, many people feel a sense of caution. They assume anything beyond the basics must be risky or even illegal, so they avoid digging deeper just to stay safe. But here's the part that changes everything. The strategies you're about to understand are not hidden loopholes in the sense of breaking rules. They are built into the system itself. They exist because the system was designed to encourage certain activities, like investing, building businesses, and creating long-term value. Once you see that, it stops feeling like a secret reserved for a few people. Instead, it starts to feel like something you were simply never shown. The shift in thinking. So before we go any further, it's important to reset how you're looking at all of this. What you're about to see has nothing to do with bending rules or trying to outsmart the system. It's not about shortcuts, and it's definitely not about doing anything questionable. In fact, the people who benefit the most from these strategies aren't operating outside the system. They're simply operating with a clearer understanding of it. The difference is subtle, but powerful. Instead of reacting to how money is taxed, they position themselves in a way that aligns with how the system is already designed to work. They don't wait until the end to deal with taxes. They think about it from the beginning: how income is created, how it's classified, and how it flows. Once you start seeing it this way, everything becomes less confusing and more intentional. And that's where we're heading next. Because when you understand the rules as they actually are, not just how they're commonly explained, you begin to see options that were always there, but easy to miss. The 7 legal tax loops. Loophole 1, income shifting through structure. The first shift starts with something most people never question: how income is classified. 2 people can earn the same amount, but the way that income is labeled can lead to very different outcomes. When you earn through a salary, it's simple and direct. You work, you get paid, and that income is immediately recognized and taxed. There's very little flexibility in how it's treated because the structure is already fixed. But when income flows through a business, the picture changes. Instead of everything being seen as personal earnings right away, business income sits in a different category. It can be managed, reinvested, or even distributed in different ways over time. That doesn't mean avoiding tax. It means having more control over when and how that income becomes personal. And that control is where the advantage comes from. Business owners aren't just earning money. They're deciding how that money moves. They can choose to keep some of it within the business for growth, allocate it toward expenses that support operations, or structure how it's paid out to themselves. Each of those decisions affects how much is ultimately taxed and when. So the real insight here isn't about earning more. It's about understanding that not all income is treated the same. Once you see that, you start to realize that structure can quietly shape outcomes just as much as effort does. Loophole 2, expenses that reduce taxable income. The second shift comes from something that seems simple on the surface: spending. But there's a quiet difference between spending money and using money strategically. For most people, expenses are just part of life. Rent, transport, food, subscriptions, money goes out, and that's the end of it. It reduces what's left in your account. But it doesn't change how your income is treated before tax. You earn first, get taxed, and then spend what remains. But when money flows through a business or income-generating activity, certain expenses are viewed differently. Some of those same costs can be connected to how income is produced. A workspace at home, laptop, internet, software, even part of your electricity. If they support your ability to generate income, they can be recognized before tax is calculated. That means they reduce the amount that is considered taxable in the first place. And that's where the shift happens. It's not about spending more. It's about understanding which expenses are tied to value creation. The line between personal life and productive activity can sometimes overlap, and when it does, the system often allows that to be reflected. So instead of every expense simply draining your income, some of them quietly reshape how that income is measured, and over time, that changes how much you actually keep. Loophole 3. Depreciation, the silent advantage. The third shift is one of the least obvious, and yet one of the most powerful. It's something called depreciation, but at its core, it's surprisingly simple. Certain assets naturally lose value over time, at least on paper. Think about things like equipment, vehicles, or even property structures. As they age or are used, their recorded value gradually decreases. That decline isn't just a number. It can be recognized as a cost. Now here's where it gets interesting. Even though the asset is losing value on paper, it may still be actively generating income. A rental property can still bring in monthly payments. A piece of equipment can still be used to produce work and earn revenue. So from the outside, it looks like you're earning consistently. But on paper, there's also a reduction being accounted for. That reduction can offset part of the income being generated, which lowers the amount considered taxable. So in a way, the system acknowledges that while you're earning, something you own is also being used up over time. And that creates a quiet advantage. You're still bringing in income, but the way that income is measured changes because of the asset behind it. It's not about hiding money. It's about recognizing how value shifts over time. Once you understand this, it starts to feel less like a secret and more like a detail most people were never taught to notice. Loophole 4. Capital gains versus earned income. The fourth shift comes from a simple idea that most people never question. Not all money is treated the same. When you earn through a salary, it's considered active income. You exchange time and effort for pay, and that income is usually taxed directly as it comes in. There's little room to change how it's viewed because the process is straightforward. But when money comes from selling an asset, it falls into a different category. This is often referred to as capital gains. Instead of being taxed like regular income, it's recognized as the increase in value of something you owned, like shares, property, or a business. And in many systems, that kind of gain is treated more favorably. So while two people might receive the same amount of money, the one earning through a salary could end up paying a higher percentage than the one who generated that income through an asset sale. That difference isn't accidental. It exists because the system is designed to encourage long-term ownership and investment. Holding and growing assets is seen as creating value over time, so it's often rewarded differently than short-term earned income. Once you see this, it changes how you think about income itself. It's no longer just about how much you make. It's about where that money is coming from and how it's classified when it reaches you. Loophole 5. Tax-advantaged accounts. The fifth shift is built around something the system quietly encourages: patience. There are certain accounts and structures designed specifically for long-term investing. You might hear them described as retirement plans or investment vehicles, but the core idea is simple. Money placed inside them is treated differently. Instead of being taxed immediately as it grows, that growth is often delayed or, in some cases, reduced. So while your investments increase in value over time, you're not constantly losing a portion of that growth to taxes along the way. It's allowed to build, uninterrupted, and that changes everything. Because when returns are left to compound without being chipped away each year, the difference becomes significant over time. What starts small can grow much faster simply because it's given space to expand. This is where the system reveals its intention. It's not just collecting tax, it's guiding behavior. It rewards those who are willing to think long-term, who are comfortable setting money aside, and allowing it to grow over time instead of chasing immediate access. So the advantage here isn't about complexity. It's about understanding that where you place your money can influence how it grows. And when you combine that with time, patience quietly becomes one of the most powerful tools you have. Loophole 6. Using debt strategically. The sixth shift is one that feels almost backwards at first. Using debt not as a burden, but as a tool. Most people are taught to avoid borrowing as much as possible, and in many cases, that's wise. But when you look at how wealth is managed at a higher level, you'll notice something different. Instead of selling assets to access money, many choose to borrow against what they already own. And that distinction matters. When you sell an asset, like shares, property, or part of a business, you often trigger a taxable event. The gain is recognized and a portion goes to tax. But when you borrow against that same asset, you're not selling it. You're simply using its value as security to access cash. So you get liquidity without creating a taxable moment. The asset can still remain in place, potentially continuing to grow or generate income while you use the borrowed funds for other opportunities or needs. Of course, this requires discipline and careful planning, because debt still has to be managed responsibly. But the idea itself reveals something important. Accessing money doesn't always have to mean giving something up. Sometimes it's about leveraging what you already have in a smarter way. And once you understand that, the way you think about both assets and debt begins to shift. Loophole 7. Timing, income, and gains. The seventh shift comes down to something most people never consider: timing. For many, income arrives on a fixed schedule. It comes in, it gets taxed, and that's the end of the story. There's little room to influence when it's received or how it's spread out, because the structure is already set. But when you have more control over how income is generated, timing becomes a powerful factor. Instead of taking everything at once, it can sometimes be delayed or distributed across different periods. That simple adjustment can influence how it's taxed, because income is often assessed within specific timeframes. Spreading it out can prevent it from being concentrated in a way that pushes it into higher tax treatment. And it's not just about reducing pressure, it's about planning with intention. Rather than reacting to whatever comes in, decisions are made ahead of time. When should this income be recognized? Is it better now or later? Does it make sense to break it into parts instead of taking it all at once? These are small questions, but they lead to meaningful differences. Because once you understand that timing is flexible in certain situations, you begin to see that income isn't just about how much you receive. It's also about when you receive it. And that awareness brings a new level of control over how your money is experienced. What this does not mean. Before this goes any further, it's important to be clear about what all of this does not mean. None of these ideas are about avoiding taxes completely. That's not the point, and it's not realistic. Taxes are part of how the system functions, and everyone operating within it contributes in some way. The difference you've been seeing isn't about escaping that responsibility. It's about understanding how the rules are applied and making decisions within those boundaries. It also doesn't happen overnight. Everything you've heard here requires a level of awareness, discipline, and in many cases, a gradual shift in how you approach money. Building structures, investing in assets, learning how income flows, these are things that take time to understand and apply. There's no instant switch that suddenly changes everything. And that's actually a good thing. Because it means this isn't about quick wins or shortcuts. It's about developing a deeper level of control over your financial life, step by step. It's about asking better questions, making more intentional choices, and gradually positioning yourself in a way that aligns with how the system works. So rather than seeing this as something distant or complicated, it's better to view it as a process, one that becomes clearer the more you learn, and more effective the more consistent you are with it. When you step back and look at everything together, a pattern begins to form, and it's not random. The real difference isn't just in how much money is made, it's in how that money is positioned before it ever reaches the person earning it. The wealthy aren't operating on a completely different system. They're working within the same framework, but from a different angle. They think about structure first, and income follows from that. Each of the ideas you've seen, how income is classified, how expenses are handled, how assets are used, how timing is planned, connects back to one thing: positioning. It's not a single move or a one-time decision. It's a series of choices that shape how money flows over time. And once you understand that, something clicks. Tax stops feeling like an unpredictable outcome and starts looking like a result. A result of how income is created, how it's categorized, and how it's managed along the way. It's not about luck, and it's not reserved for a select few. It's simply the outcome of decisions made earlier in the process. That's the bigger picture. Because when you shift your focus from just earning to positioning, you begin to see that the system hasn't been working against you. You just hadn't been shown how to work within it. Who you become. At this point, something deeper starts to change, and it's not just about money. You begin to move differently. Instead of only focusing on earning, you start thinking about how that income is shaped before it even arrives. You stop reacting to outcomes and start paying attention to the decisions that create them. It's a quiet shift, but a powerful one. You're no longer just someone working for income. You become someone who understands how income flows, how it's structured, and how small choices can influence what you keep. You start asking different questions. Not just, how can I make more? But, how can I position what I earn more effectively? That shift changes everything. Because once you see the system clearly, you stop feeling like you're at its mercy. You begin to operate with intention. You plan ahead instead of adjusting after the fact. And over time, that awareness turns into control. Not overnight, not all at once, but gradually in a way that feels steady and real. And that's when it stops being just information and starts becoming part of how you think. When you look back at everything, the biggest realization is this: the system was never set up to work against you. It simply operates on rules that most people were never taught to see clearly. What once felt unfair starts to make more sense when you understand how it's structured. And that realization changes how you move forward, because it's no longer about feeling stuck or questioning why others seem ahead. It becomes about learning, adjusting, and gradually aligning yourself with how things actually work. The gap was never effort, it was awareness. So instead of focusing only on earning more, you begin to value understanding more. Because in the end, it's not about how much you earn, it's about how much you understand. If this changed the way you see money, then you're already thinking differently from most people. And that's exactly what this channel is about. Not quick wins or shortcuts, but understanding how the system really works so you can move with clarity. If that's the kind of perspective you want more of, consider subscribing. Because here, we don't just talk about making money, we focus on keeping it, growing it, and understanding the game behind it. And once you see it clearly, you'll never look at money the same way again.